I think he's one of those players that maybe gets drafted for the special teams, makes a roster. You see some of the athleticism, kind of Jeremy McNichols-like, gets on the field a little bit and start to see maybe this guy's a weapon that we can use every now and then.
Who is Shane Hallam talking about? Find out on a special episode of the Draft Sharks podcast right now. Matt Schaff of DraftSharks.com. And if you know Shane Hallam, then you know he's been doing this whole prospect grading and mock draft thing for quite a while. If you don't already know Shane Hallam, then you should. Shane, how long exactly have you been evaluating film and grading NFL draft prospects?
So I've been doing this since 2004. It was the first year that I graded NFL draft prospects kind of officially myself, right? I mean, we were all fans of it beforehand, but that was the year where I was like, I'm getting into this and kind of starting a system. This will be year 22 for me, 22nd NFL draft that I have covered and graded. My goal is always to have graded every prospect that will get drafted, and I think I'll definitely achieve that again this year.
If you watch the NFL draft, you've seen Stump the Truck. So we're sitting there watching the draft with Shane, and Shane's like, yeah, that guy's a left-footed kicker from Canada. He can't hit from any farther than 42 yards. So we've got our own Stump the Truck, and he hasn't been stumped yet. According to the Huddle Report, it seems like you do pretty well with this whole grading and projecting prospect thing. Tell people who aren't familiar with the Huddle Report what I'm talking about there and what the Huddle Report is.
So the Huddle Report is a NFL draft website. It's been around not quite as long as Draft Sharks, been around since 2001. They hold kind of the universal contest for the NFL draft for analysts. So they'll take the big boards of all the analysts, of the Mel Kipers and the Todd McShays that you see all the way down to anyone who wants to submit that's around on the internet, as well as grading the first round of people's mock drafts. And they have a kind of a whole grading system there. So I've been pretty successful. My big board scores for the past 5 years rank in the top 5. I'm currently 4th going into this draft. I've won that contest twice, meaning that my big board has matched the NFL draft's top 100, who's actually gotten drafted more accurately than almost anyone. So in terms of a multi-year winner, there's only been 6 of us. That includes people like Bob McGinn, Todd McShay. So it's kind of some of the big names in the industry. And in terms of mock draft accuracy, I'm in the top 20 for the past 5 years. That only grades the first round. You know, I'm one of the few out there also that do pass the first round and do 7-round mock drafts and have been for over a decade here now. Then in terms of the Huddle Report, I think I've done pretty well and shows kind of what the accuracy is. A lot of the big names come out with these mock drafts, come out with their big boards. But if you actually go back and look, it's not even that close to what actually happens.
Yeah. So Shane has been doing it for a while. He has done it well. Frankly, that's why we've got Shane with us on our side at Draft Sharks. You can find Shane's full 7-round NFL mock draft on DraftSharks.com right now. We're not going to be running through every single pick on here because that would take a really long time, and Shane and I each have families. We are going to highlight some of Shane's favorite player team fits from each round, as well as some potential day 3 fantasy sleepers. Let's start it in round 1, Shane, with your 3 favorite fits of that round. The first guy is an offensive lineman.
Left tackle Kelvin Banks out of Texas, I had going to the 49ers at number 11. And I love this fit so much that I hope it happens in the real NFL draft. We saw the 49ers last year. Trent Williams, 37, missed the final 7 games of 2024. And the offense was fine, but kind of fell apart. I think they need that really franchise left tackle that fits the Kyle Shanahan zone blocking scheme. And Kelvin Banks from Texas is it. 5-star prospect going into college football, 3-year starter at Texas, started game 1, day 1, every game out there. He's not quite Trent Williams, and he's not a Hall of Fame left tackle that we know, at least at this point, but can get out there in space, can be this kind of nasty blocker. He's tough. His footwork is so good. I think in the zone blocking scheme to really give him that edge would be a perfect fit for the 49ers, where he can step in there with injury, play left tackle, can play right tackle, or be someone in a year you kind of develop a little bit, get some of the sloppy tendencies out. He had a top 30 visit with the 49ers, so they definitely seem interested in Banks, and the value at 11, I think, would be pretty solid.
My wife would like if I could get rid of some of my sloppy tendencies too, but not a whole lot of hope there. Trent Williams, as you mentioned, turns 37 in July. Offensive line help is something that most teams could use. And Williams, you mentioned the missed time last year. He has actually missed multiple games every season since 2015. So even insurance would be a good thing, even if Trent Williams is not quite ready to hang it up. 16 total missed games in his 5 seasons with the 49ers. Next up is a defensive lineman that you and I talked about on our podcast about IDPs earlier this week. Who you got?
Derrick Harmon, defensive lineman out of Oregon. I have going to the Pittsburgh Steelers at 21. I'm not on the Steelers taking a quarterback at 21 bandwagon. I think with Andy Weidel, the assistant GM there, coming from the Eagles, they like to build in those trenches first, and the defensive line is definitely an area of need for them. We talked about it on the last podcast that Derrick Harmon gets the Cam Hayward comparisons often. I think the Steelers will love that. If he lasts to 21, I think it's going to be hard for the Steelers to pass him up. Really big motor. He's always going long, tough. He has that kind of Steelers mentality. Every play is going to make you work and work and work. And so with Larry Ogunjobi being cut from the Steelers, I think you could see Harmon line up opposite Cam Hayward this year and eventually grow into that Cam Hayward role, give you a little bit of pass rush wiggle, but he's really built to steal the edge, crash the run. He took a top 30 visit to Pittsburgh. So I think they're definitely interested if the quarterback value and how they evaluate the QBs isn't there. I think defensive line is probably the most likely scenario for the Pittsburgh Steelers in the first round.
Unfortunately, because Harmon's not a wide receiver, he doesn't have to be clinically insane to fit the Steelers. Are you sure, as a Pittsburgh fan, Shane, that you're not just trying to will the team away from taking Jackson Dart or Jalen Milroe here?
Look, it's possible. If they take Jalen Milroe, I think on our draft night, you'll see me throw up something and throw the popcorn in the air or whatever. But I wouldn't be fine with Jackson Dart. I'd be fine with them taking a shot. I just feel like the Steelers generally, when they took Kenny Pickett, made that mistake. and I think maybe have learned from it a little bit that we'll take the defensive line. We'll take the best player and worry about the quarterback later, for better or for worse.
Certainly building out from the trenches is one thing that other teams, I think, would do well to copy from the Eagles because it's worked well since Andy Reid was in charge of things there. Your final one from round one is the last pick of the round and could be a replacement for Dallas Goedert if we finally get the trade that's been rumored during this offseason. Who you got?
I have the Philadelphia Eagles taking Mason Taylor, the tight end out of LSU, at pick 32. I don't know if I will be bold enough in my final mock draft, which will come out the night before the NFL draft, to put Mason Taylor in the first round, but there's been some buzz about him potentially going there, and the Eagles being a team that's interested if they can move Dallas Goedert or feel like they can move on and have this value. They met with him at the Combine. There's some similarities with Taylor and kind of a young Dallas Goedert, right? He's a solid blocker, nice soft hands in the receiving game, reliable in the red zone. Taylor has that kind of length, toughness to add in the trenches. When we talk about it, adding in the trenches, this is kind of an extension of that when you're not taking an offensive lineman, but a player that can help in that run game with Saquon Barkley and also protect the quarterback, but gives you kind of multiple setups in Nick Sirianni's offense. You want a tight end that can be in the slot a little bit, that can play in line, that you can move around the formation and create those mismatches. I think Mason Taylor fits that better than any other tight end that would be available to the Eagles.
On to round two. And once again, your first favorite fit is an offensive lineman. Who you got here?
I have Tyler Booker, the inside offensive lineman guard, going to the Jets at pick 42. Might be a first round pick. This could be something if the Jets move around in the first round, maybe could even take him in the middle of the first round. You might look at the Jets and think, oh, well, guard's not a need, right? They have Elijah Vera Tucker. They have John Simpson. Both those players are going to be free agents after this season. I think we're going to see the Jets continue to try to bolster that offensive line, not just for this year, but for the future, for Breece Hall, for Justin Fields. And Booker fits kind of that nastiness that this new offense is going to bring, right? Offensive coordinator Tanner Engstrand, coming from the Lions, is going to want some push on that interior offensive line. And that's what Booker gives you. He's kind of immovable, very girthy, very tough, pulling guard. It definitely has that acceleration, explosiveness off the line to get into open space and maybe block for Breece Hall, block for Justin Fields in the open field, rushing the football. I just think it's a really good fit if the Jets are looking a little bit more into the future and not just, hey, this year we're kind of pushing the chips in. I think sometimes we lose sight of that in the NFL draft. We think, oh, here's the team needs, right? Here's the big holes on this team. but these GMs are looking at kind of 3-year windows and seeing who's going to leave, who do I have to pay. I'm going to have to pay Sauce Gardner and Garrett Wilson. I'm probably not going to be able to keep these guards. Let's draft one now and pay those guys to come back.
Right. They should be drafting like dynasty managers as opposed to redraft managers. So a second round pick doesn't necessarily need to start right away, although a team would tend to like a guy pick that early to do so. Is there room for Booker this year, even if both of those guys stay in their spots at guard?
Probably not. Probably not someone that you're going to plug in there day one if both those players are there. I mean, I think there's a possibility if Booker comes in and is really good, could maybe start over John Simpson. He could certainly use an upgrade. He's not exactly a world-class guard. I think there's maybe a potential for a camp battle to happen. But I mean, just having someone like Booker who can play left guard, right guard, even took some snaps at center in college, that versatility at the very least, you can use him as a backup that way.
The next guy in round 2, Shane, I was surprised to see that you thought he would make it to round 2. Who are we talking about now?
Jihaad Campbell, linebacker out of Alabama, going to the Colts at 45. And you're right. He was a player I was trying to fit into that first round and kind of did the first round. He's not there. So this could be a first round possibility for the Colts. It wouldn't be super surprising to see them take Jihaad Campbell in that first round, because he's a interesting player in terms of role, an off-ball linebacker, but has some edge capabilities to rush the passer. And so the speed and athleticism that Jihaad Campbell has, we know the Colts love it. They are the team that consistently drafts the highest percentage of pure athletes. If you look at the relative athletic score of the players they draft, almost always above an 80 percentile athlete. And though Campbell didn't work out, definitely fits that mold. Now they have a new defensive coordinator there, Lou Anarumo from the Bengals. And so generally a 2 linebacker scheme, but that weak side linebacker is an important part of Anarumo's scheme. Jermaine Pratt played it for Cincinnati. You want someone that can cover tight ends, that can rush the passer, that can play the edge in the run game as well. You need that versatile fit, or the defense kind of breaks down, which we saw with the Bengals happen often. I think Campbell would free Zaire Franklin and really fill a big hole for the Colts.
I think it was Benjamin Albright that I saw on Twitter say that the Bucs wanting to take Jihaad Campbell in round 1 was one of those worst kept secrets of round 1. So I'll be curious to see if Campbell does make it out of round 2. I think whether he goes in round 1 or round 2, he's going to be one of the top IDP targets for me this year.
I think he's going to be a great IDP potential. And like you said, I think within the last week since I've written this, I feel like probably have him too low. It's probably one of those guys I'm circling, and when I do my final one, he's gonna have to move up in around 1 at least somewhere.
That's one of the good things about this exercise. You go through it, and if you just do it and you're like, well, forget about it, we'll see how that works, then you're probably not really putting as much into it as it seems like. It can be a check on yourself to be like, oh, is this really how it's going to go, or do I need to adjust? So like Shane said, there's going to be an update. You can find it on draftsharks.com now, but you'll find an update before the draft as well. The last guy in round 2, the best fits that we're talking about in that round, a player that we almost talked about on our IDP podcast earlier this week, Arkansas edge Landon Jackson. What do you like about him and his team fit here?
I have him going to the Detroit Lions at number 60 overall. Jackson, I think, is a great fit for the Lions because of how they rush the passer. He came into college at about 220 pounds and bulked up into the 260s throughout his college career. 6.5 sacks, 13.5 tackles for loss this past year. But that explosive, athletic first step, we think of the Lions, they want these tough, bite the kneecaps off players. The first Dan Campbell quote still lives on, but really they want athletes that can play the position and are going to play with a high motor. And that's what Landon Jackson brings to the table. We saw when Aiden Hutchinson went down, just how much it completely disrupted that defense. Having someone on the opposite side that can still rush the passer, I think is going to be an important position for the Lions to get. And I think Jackson can work you over in so many different ways. He has a lot of different pass rush moves and that explosion. He's someone that you could, squeeze inside on third down and keep him on the field. I think they want a 3-down player as well. So similar traits to Aiden Hutchinson, kind of Aiden Hutchinson light in a lot of ways for Landon Jackson. And I think that's probably the best setup for the Lions for another edge position.
There are a lot of undersized edge players in this class. Jackson is not one of those. 6'6", 264, and a 110.1 speed score. He ran at the combine, unlike a lot of his classmates at the position. 83rd percentile speed score, that is, though. Elite relative athletic score, 9.95, 10th best all time among edge players, according to Kent Lee Platt. Not elite production, but good. 13 total sacks, 24 tackles for loss over the past 2 years. So I'm going to be very interested to see where this guy goes. Now we're going to move on to round 3. We're going to cut it down a little bit. We're going to talk favorite offensive and favorite defensive player in round 3, then round 4. Round 3 up first. We got another offensive lineman, Shane. I think you got to type.
Look, I don't get to talk about offensive linemen working for Draft Sharks anymore, so I got to fit it in here a little bit. But I always like some of these small school players I like to pull out. I'm going to pull out a couple here. Charles Grant, the offensive tackle out of William and Mary, I have going to the Jaguars at 70th overall. I think he's an interesting case of a versatile offensive tackle, offensive guard, kind of tweener, 6'5", 311 pounds, gained some weight to work out at his pro day. William and Mary, very zone heavy scheme. They are not a gap style. And so him trying to kind of show that he has that strength and functional strength to work in a more multi scheme system like Jacksonville's going to run this year I think he was successful with that. So almost a 7-foot wingspan, just really long arms. He has all those kind of tools that you look for in what could be a franchise left tackle. Worst case, you can put him in there at guard. I think he can do a lot of different things, but definitely a small school lineman that I think is going to go off the board in the 3rd round. And people will be like, who's this guy? Charles Grant, William and Mary really has upside to be a starter in the NFL.
Shane, please don't talk down to us like we don't all already know the blocking scheme at William and Mary. I mean, it's broad knowledge. I was happy to see William and Mary on this list in particular because my grandparents actually met at William and Mary a long time ago. My grandpa briefly went out for football, realized he was out of place when guys were introducing themselves and it'd be like Rock Hudson, 6'2", 230 pounds, all New Jersey, and like Brent Catheter, 6'1", 250 pounds, all Pennsylvania. And my grandpa's like Bob Schauf, 6 foot, 175. All me. That was basically his highlight of his football career. Didn't play for very long.
Pretty much a Charles Grant, right? Pretty much a Charles Grant. There.
I don't think they would have gone up against each other too well in practice. Next guy on the defensive side, who we got in round 3?
So this one is Josaiah Stewart, edge rusher out of Michigan, a player that was on my radar back when he played at Coastal Carolina. He had 12.5 sacks as a true freshman at Coastal Carolina, and watching him, I was like, this guy's an NFL player. Went to Michigan, did okay in 2023, but really exploded this past season. 13 tackles for loss, 8.5 sacks. He's playing with 2 interior linemen who are going to go in the 1st round. But you watch Stewart, and he's someone that is just super aggressive, runs really well. I really like his hands and his feet, how they work together, getting around the edge. He's kind of small, under 250. I think ideally you'd like him to stand up and be a pass rusher that way. So I have him going to the Patriots at 77th overall. I think with Mike Vrabel there and what we've seen with his schemes in terms of stand-up linebackers rushing the passer, I think Josaiah Stewart's a really good fit for them. I think he has the upside to be a day 3 edge rusher that could end up becoming a starter, at least in a kind of 3rd down role.
Yet another undersized edge player in this class, 6'1", 249, but carried over that production, especially in tackles for loss from Coastal Carolina to Michigan, as you mentioned. So we like that. Let's move to round 4. Now we've got a guy that maybe is climbing boards and should be of interest to fantasy players. Who we got?
So this one is Kyle Williams, wide receiver out of Washington State. I have going to the Jaguars at 107. There's always a couple players in every NFL draft that I watch and I don't understand the draft capital. And I think Kyle Williams is one of those players for me. I have him going early in round 4 to kind of hedge myself, but I think in my final mock draft, he could go in the 2nd round of the NFL draft. And I just don't see that. He's definitely a fast player, plays down the field. He's going to be a deep threat. I think Kyle Williams can do that, coming from UNLV over to Washington State, has that intriguing, ability of 5'11", 190, but I just don't see much more than that. He's someone that got kind of run ragged at the line in any type of press or physical situation, drops passes. Like, he looks like a day 3 receiver to me, but is probably going to go day 2 in the NFL draft. So I think always for fantasy as well as reality, always try to figure that out, and why there is kind of a disconnect sometimes just in some of these players between what I see and even I think other analysts on, around the internet aren't exactly high on Kyle Williams. There's not many people that I see that are like, oh, this guy, potential first round pick. I wanted to kind of talk about him because I think he's going to go higher than he should.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll talk more about him once we do finally get that draft capital. We'll see if he is actually as highly regarded in the NFL as is being buzzed about now, or if he's just one of those guys that gets inflated ahead of time. And then we realize that the teams actually agree with Shane, you, and other folks who have been watching him for longer. On the defensive side, who you got from round 4?
I'm taking Hunter Wohler, safety out of Wisconsin, 6'2", 213. He's the type of player that I would just bet on making it in the NFL. Maybe he's not going to be a stud safety, but I have him going to the Bills, number 109. He's really productive, started for 2 years, really good athlete, was a better athlete than I expected in terms of his workouts, 4.57 40 time, 37 vertical. So he has that explosiveness and just the hustle and the football IQ, I think, is super high. He has the size to cover tight ends, knows how to cover them well. He can play deep, reads the quarterback, plays special teams at times at Wisconsin, even though he was kind of their star safety. I like him. I think, Xavier Watts from Notre Dame, I have going day 2. I don't think Hunter Wohler's that far behind Xavier Watts in terms of a player on the field. And I think that could be a real steal if Wohler goes. I even think I have him a little high, for where he might actually go, just because I'm a big fan and I think he should be a day 2 pick. But if he goes in the 5th or 6th round, I think Hunter Wohler could be an absolute steal.
Good size on him, and certainly if he lands with Buffalo, that would be a good spot because they have some open competition at both safety positions likely heading into this season. So that would be interesting position to watch if we do get Hunter Wohler or another safety to the Bills. Now let's close it out looking at rounds 5 through 7. And these rounds can really be pretty fluid. Like, there's not a whole lot of difference between a guy being a 7th round pick and being a 5th round pick. Once we're talking about all the teams filling gaps and moving around and all that. So let's mash it all together, Shane. Pick out 3 players that folks who are playing fantasy should be aware of, Dynasty in particular, heading into the draft. First up is a wide receiver. Who you got?
Ricky White, wide receiver from UNLV. I have going to the Patriots at number 171 overall. And this is a production play. Ricky White is playing at UNLV. He's playing in a non-Power 5 conference, but racked up over 2,500 receiving yards over the past 2 seasons. You watch him, he's not a super athlete. He's not a super clean route runner, and you're like, oh, he's getting separation. But, man, he has kind of that footwork and explosion in the football IQ, I think, to run a bunch of different routes, to get open is really intriguing. So I like the fit with the Patriots, with a team that needs wide receivers, needs wide receiver depth to plug him in there. I think Ricky White could be a player due to the production that finds his way onto an NFL squad. You draft him in Dynasty, plug him on your taxi squad. There's an injury in front of him. Could be a player that just produces, has the hands, has the mind between the ears to get open, knows how to read zone coverages. I think he's going to have an easy transition to the NFL despite not being from a Georgia or Ohio State.
Really showed out in stuff like dominator rating, target share, 45.9% of UNLV's receptions this past year, 45.9% of the receiving yards, 47.8% of the receiving touchdowns. So we love market shares like that, especially in a late round guy where you're just looking for some reason to like him and take a shot on him and see what works out. Now, Shane, the next one, I don't know, seems kind of lazy. You're telling me an Iowa tight end, like you're just slapping a name here, aren't you?
I mean, look, you see an Iowa tight end, and you got to at least talk about them a little bit. Luke Lachey, a tight end of Iowa, I have going to the Lions at number 196 to play with former teammate Sam Laporta. I had a little fun with that on those day 3 picks. But if you had told me when entering college, I think Luke Lachey was probably the better tight end than Sam Laporta. Now, Lachey has dealt with some injuries, I think slowed down a little bit. But in terms of athleticism that we see from these Iowa tight ends pretty consistently, maybe 6'6", 247. He kind of had that early in his college career and showed the explosiveness, the hands catching, the red zone ability. I was like, this guy has NFL potential. And then dealt with injuries the past 2 years. I think has definitely slowed down a step to a point where, okay, he's not, a day 2, even early day 3 pick. But I'm going to keep betting on the Iowa tight ends that can block, that can catch, that have experience. And I think Lachey, he's probably not going to be a starter in the NFL, right? He's a day 3 pick. But could he go somewhere like Detroit, back up Sam Laporta? We've seen with tight ends, there's an injury, someone gets plugged in that number 1 spot against the defense, doesn't cover the tight end well. I think Lachey could be a player worth a taxi squad stash.
Yeah, certainly there's plenty of track record on Iowa tight ends where they can be worth late shots. Are you sure, though, that you're not pumping them up just because you're a big fan of Nick Lachey and 98 Degrees?
I am a big fan of Nick Lachey and 98 Degrees, though. So I maybe a little part of this.
The last guy on this list, I learned his name when you sent me your notes for this podcast. So tell me about Derrick Powell.
Yeah, Derrick Powell from Central Arkansas. I have going to the Seattle Seahawks at number 234. I want to highlight some of these small school players. This was a player I didn't know much about either, and then watch Central Arkansas's offense. I'm like, whoa, this is a guy that should be drafted. It's just the explosiveness that he brings to the table. Probably one of the better return players in this draft too. So when you have that special teams ability, then you start thinking, maybe a team's going to draft him late. We hear about Marcus Yarns from Delaware is in our top 100 over at Draft Sharks. Never had a 1,000-yard rushing season. Derrick Powell had multiple 1,000-yard rushing seasons. He's done it consistently, has the explosiveness, has the kick return ability. I think he's one of those players that maybe gets drafted for the special teams, makes a roster. You see some of the athleticism, kind of Jeremy McNichols-like, gets on the field a little bit and start to see maybe this guy's a weapon that we can use every now and then. So I think Powell's definitely a deep dynasty sleeper whose name you probably will never hear on another fantasy football podcast.
That was 4 deeps for anybody counting at home. And, the return stuff doesn't usually do much for us fantasy-wise in most formats, but it's important from an NFL perspective because it gives that player another way to get into a camp, to make the regular season roster, and then maybe show the team that he's got a little bit more to offer, even if it takes injuries ahead of him to get that opportunity. Like Shane mentioned, Derrick Powell is pick number 234 in his 7-round mock draft on draftsharks.com right now. There are still 23 more forecasted picks after that spot. So check out the entire thing today. Check back later in the week for Shane's updates. And hey, check back after the draft happens and laugh at what Shane got wrong, because it's bound to happen when you're projecting 257 NFL players. This kind of deep dive into the prospects, the team fits, and potential fantasy values is exactly what makes Draft Sharks your unfair advantage.